The Pope and Young Club wants to welcome you as we rally together to ensure our bow hunting opportunities for today and tomorrow. You've come to the podcast that believes in preserving, protecting, and promoting the passion for bow hunting. Join us as we strive to be the voice of today's bow hunter. This is the Pope and Young Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pope and Young Podcast. This is Jason Rounsaville. I'm joined today with my co-host Dylan Ray, and we have a special guest, Steve Felix. How are you doing, Steve?
Hey, I'm doing great. Good to be here, guys.
You know, Steve, just for anyone who may not know, if you haven't seen a magazine or a Hoyt ad in the last few years, you shot was it Montana?
Yeah, I shot it in Montana in 2016.
In 2016. So anyway, Steve, thanks for being here. First off, and tell us a little bit, when you're not killing world record elk, what else do you do in your spare time?
In my spare time, I prepare to try to kill big elk. So,
all right.
Which means, I spend a lot of time shooting my bow. I attend a few 3D archery shoots during the summer. Work on a little physical conditioning once in a while. And besides that, I live in a great community in northwest Montana, Seeley Lake. Try to spend a lot of time outside, gathering firewood, picking huckleberries, do some shut antler hunting in the spring from time to time, and try to live a solid outdoor lifestyle here in Montana.
Very nice. I know I've bumped into you a couple of times at 3D shoots up on the mountain there in Idaho.
Yeah.
So, and we had a chance to visit at the Mountain Archery Fest there, and it's kind of neat when a guy's coming off the hill from shooting the Pope and Young world record course, and he sees his elk on the world record course. That doesn't happen every day.
No, it doesn't, and that's pretty cool. A couple friends of mine, we've shot that the last couple of years and had a lot of fun with that. And yeah, it's kind of surreal when you're shooting at something that's being represented for an animal that you've killed. So no, it's a lot of fun.
That's great.
Yeah, Jason, me and Brandon were talking at one of the last events, and we come up with a solution that if your world record gets broken, then we send you the target. That way you get to have it forever.
There you go.
I don't know. Can Brandon afford that? We had 10 new world records this year. That's a lot of money.
Either way, he's got to replace them. I mean,
he does. So, yeah.
Either way, you've got to make a new one if it gets broken. So
yeah,
I think it's cool that the hunter has the ability to shoot that animal whenever. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because guys like me and you will never get a chance. Now Steve can have the chance every day.
See, I actually got the chance, and I shot a world record elk. It was just 5 years after Steve had already shot it. So, and I shot it on the Pope and Young world record course at the Mountain Archery Festival. And I think the first time, I think it was the first time we met was up there 2 years ago. And you were coming off the course, and we got to meet, and it was a lot of fun. And you're like, you know what? It was fun shooting it, but it was better the first time. So I remember that quote. That was great.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know what? Tell us, I think a lot of people have a misconceived notion in a lot of cases about, somebody shoots a world record elk. He's here's just some rich guy. He probably paid, $50,000 to go shoot that elk. And, I think a lot of people that know better or should know better have that. And like, I'm as good as anybody. So if it didn't happen for me, it couldn't. So I absolutely love this story, because it is literally the story that it could have been me. Or it could have been Dylan. Well, maybe not Dylan, but it was you. It could have been you, and it was you.
Couldn't have been Dylan.
Couldn't have been Dylan. And so, Steve, tell us the story, because I love the story, and I think people will really enjoy hearing about how someone goes about killing, one of the iconic bow hunting species world records.
Yeah. So one of the things one of the reasons I live in Montana, a lot of people ask me, how long have you lived in Montana, and why did you move here? And I grew up in Minnesota, and I moved to Montana back in 1994. And the reason I tell people I moved to Montana is because Minnesota really doesn't have elk. So, and it's a true statement, and they laugh, but that was one of the main reasons I moved out here.
That's
I've been fortunate enough to have a nice career with the Montana Department of Transportation. I'm the maintenance chief presently in Missoula, so I've got a very busy job, but I have some really, really great people that I work with every day. And when you ask me what I do when I'm not out bow hunting, I have a very busy career, spend a lot of time at work. So the beauty of being an elk hunter and a bow hunter in Montana is we have some of the best season lengths and dates that you can have anywhere in the country. And if you're a bow hunter and you're going to hunt in the lower 48, Montana's a tough place to beat. We have a lot of versatility and a lot of opportunity if you're willing to get out and get after it. And I've never paid an outfitter to go on an elk hunt before. So it's been totally a do-it-yourselfer for a number of years, and have some really good hunting partners that I've hunted with, and learned a lot about elk hunting. Actually, the first time I came out elk hunting in Montana was in 1988, and hunted here in the Seeley Lake area where I currently reside. It's kind of come full circle there, which is kind of cool. Being able to work in Missoula, Montana, and live in Seeley Lake, Montana, is pretty special. It's a special place. The climate's awesome. The people are awesome. It's not overly crowded, except in the last 18 months, it seems like it's gotten crowded because people have discovered it. And COVID, the whole COVID situation has definitely had some unintended consequences for some of us here in Montana. A lot of people coming in, some good, some not so good, but it's changing like everything else. But so back to the story. So I drew a limited entry type permit for a rifle hunt, and which also allows you to bow hunt in an area in eastern Montana back in 2016. And there's some things to the story that are kind of interesting to people. In 2015, I had my left shoulder replaced. It was basically wore out. It was bone on bone, and it was pretty painful. And it was difficult for me to even draw a bow or do much. So I elected to have that surgery, and there was a lot of apprehension there going into that surgery. I was afraid, am I ever going to be able to bow hunt again? And if something how am I going to be able to hunt or even draw my bow if something doesn't go right? Is the muscle, am I going to be accurate? Am I going to be able to do this again? So I was pretty concerned about it, but the pain was enough that I finally had to go and do it. And in the 2015 season, leading up to 2016, I was able to get my bow drawn, but it was pretty painful and pretty difficult. And so coming into 2016, I had some more time to rehab and get stronger with that. And coming into August of 2016, I was starting to feel pretty comfortable and pretty confident. My shoulder strength was returning. Stamina was a little bit better. I could probably shoot about 25 arrows comfortably in an evening. Had to take it easy. I didn't want to inflame it, but and out to about 60 yards, I was pretty accurate. Had done, and I was confident, So leading up to that season, and my hunting partner, Chad Tiffany, we had put in for the tag together, and we both drew it. And we likely would have gotten the bow tag on a second choice, but since we had those rifle tags, we set some pretty lofty goals for ourselves. If we weren't able to kill them with a bow, we'd be able to rifle hunt. But I got to tell you, the bow hunting is better than the rifle hunting by far. But we.
You're not going to get a lot of takers on that argument on this show.
I hear you. I hear you. But being able to bow hunt that country, and we actually had started there a few years earlier, and it's the country does not have high elk density. It's a tough area to elk hunt in. You have to be mentally strong. You have to be extremely patient. You have to be very persistent. It's not the type of hunt where you're going to go out and hear a lot of elk bugling and see a lot of elk. And it's a different type of hunting. At least we've found it to be successful. You have to be very patient. You have to do a lot of glassing, and you have to cover a lot of country. So leading into that season, Chad was really busy. He was trying to get a cabin built for his family up in the crazy mountains. So he was going to have a difficult time getting away early in the season. We had planned on spending about 10 to 14 days starting about September 18th or 19th. And me working for the Department of Transportation, the opening week is you generally always around Labor Day. And I went up and helped Chad with his cabin, his family. And it was really wet and rainy, so really weren't missing much. And coming into the second week of the season here, I got a call one morning about a bad accident on I-90 just east of Missoula, and I went out to help the guys and visit with the highway patrol captain to get some details of it. And it was a double fatal accident. A father and a young child had been killed, and those are very, very tough to witness and see, the scenes. But it's important that we understand what happens on the roadways, and that's one of my jobs. And wasn't feeling real good about that. And I got back later that morning and looked at my work calendar, and I didn't have a whole lot going on Friday or Monday. So I said, I'm going to take off and head east and spend a couple days bouncing around over there and see if I can find some elk. And so I got up on that Friday morning, September 9th, and threw my spike tent, my gear together quick and sleeping bag, and threw some Mountain House stuff in, some Gatorade and in the Yeti, and took off and headed for eastern Montana. And I got camp set about 7:30, 8 o'clock that night. Just spectacular weather. Montana in September, if there's anything that's close to heaven, that's got to be close. Highs 60s, 70s, low 80s, and cool mornings, and just the clearest air and the cleanest air you can find about anywhere. So went to bed that night, and I was 50 years old at the time. I had just turned 50 a month before that, and been hunting a lot of years. But we as bow hunters and hunters, there's always that internal drive that we have, and I still get butterflies, first day of the season, that anticipation is really strong, and you feel like you're a kid again, the first time you got to go squirrel hunting or duck hunting or something like that. You just remember those things, and those feelings trigger those memories. And I think that's one of the reasons I hunt is because it's, it gets in your soul and it doesn't go away. And, so went to bed, crawled in the sleeping bag, had, it was good to be away from work, and that bad accident thought. And I thought, I'm going to get up, I'm going to get an early start, head in and just bounce around all day, glass, kick around, try to find sign, just see what I could do. So got up about 3:45, 3:30 that morning, woke up, fired up the jet boil, had some coffee quick, ate a banana, drank a little bit of Gatorade, got in the truck and headed down the road, and wasn't hunting very far from camp. So I remember the morning very, very well. It was pitch black. There was no moon. So it had potential to be a pretty good morning, and parked my truck, rolled the windows down, and just sat for a little bit, hoping to hear a bugle somewhere. And there was nothing for about 15 minutes. So I said, well, I'll just get my gear together, threw my carbon element in my pack, and crossed the right-of-way fence and headed in. I wanted to be to a certain glassing spot by about 8 a.m. I knew that country pretty well, and was fairly confident that I might see an elk or two that morning, but started up, and just as I started up the ridge, a pretty strong south wind came up and just starting to barely break daylight, and had about a 2.5 mile hike into that spot, and through some pretty good coulees and up some long ridges, and ponderosa pine forest mainly is what it is. So headed in, and right as I started in, I heard an elk bugle right before the wind came up, and I gave myself a little fist pump. I was pretty excited. You hear that first bugle of the season, and all is right with the world. I mean, those are things you never forget. So headed in and got cruising along, and I was probably a mile in on this nice little ridge, and I looked over to my left, and here's this spike bull elk looking at me about 15 yards away, and I had the wind, and he had this curious look on his face, and he didn't stop eating. He was still chewing, and he's looking at me, and a minute or two later, out step a couple other spikes, 3 spikes, and still velvet spikes, that time of year. And they really didn't give me a long look. They weren't too concerned, and they just kind of fed off the edge of the ridge and down. And I felt like, well, that's a pretty good sign. There's some elk around, and started up the ridge a little further, and then I could start to hear some bulls bugling. But with the strong wind, I bet the wind was 15 to 20 miles an hour, and it was steady. It wasn't a gusty wind. So it was difficult to hear exactly where those bugles were coming from. But knowing that country and being in there before, I had a pretty good idea where they were probably headed. So I cruised along and, stop and glass, listen, stop and glass. And I got to my bugle, or my glassing point at about 8 that morning. I took my pack off, was just getting ready to sit down to have a quick sandwich and sip some Gatorade and glass for a little bit. And I heard a bull bugle not very far away, and I knew exactly where it was coming from. And the wind was starting to slow down just slightly so I could hear a little bit better. So I threw my pack back on, grabbed my bow, put my release on, and kind of cruised down that ridge, and got to a point where I thought where the bugle came from that I probably might be able to see that bull. So I threw my binoculars up and started glassing down below me, and sure enough, there he was. It was one of those moments where I looked at him down there, and I went, holy blankety blank. I mean, that is a big bull. And he was kind of broadside to me, and there was this little ponderosa pine kind of tucked into this pucker brush type brushy stuff, and he was just in there just ripping the shit out of it. And it was kind of surreal, watching him, and just the size. I mean, the length of all the points, and I knew it was an exceptional elk.
Well, you were right.
I was.
You were right on that.
I was. So, but
and then Dylan, can we type up a quote? Was that holy blankety blank? That's a big elk. Yeah. That's not a little one. Yeah. Okay.
What goes through your mind when you see a world record elk? And then we'll put a
yeah.
Well, here would be the, what goes through your mind. Well, what went through my mind initially is, just the size of it. And because Chad and I had set, fairly lofty goals, our goals that year were to kill elk that would, be Boone and Crockett quality elk, 375 plus. That we thought that not an unrealistic goal. We thought one of us may be able to attain that. So looking at that elk, I said, well, I'm pretty sure that one would probably do it.
I hope so.
So I'm standing there and he's down below there, and then another bull chimes off just above him, and they're bugling back and forth a little bit, and I'm looking, and the way the wind was directly in my face, and it was not varying, and it was steady. And where he was at, it took me, I don't know, 30 seconds, 45 seconds to kind of study the area around there. And said, I think I can get right on top of him, So I backed up off the ridge, kind of out of sight of him, and I shot down there was a little bit of a coulee there, and he was down in this little bowl, and there was a little finger draw that kind of came down into that bowl. And I said, if I can get on top of that finger ridge there and kind of slip over the top of that, he may be right below me there if he doesn't move a lot from the time it took me to get there. And he was about 400 yards away when I first saw him. And, I have good glass. I hunt with a pair of 10 by 50 Swaros, and they are invaluable in that country. But when you see something like that in a pair of 10 by 50 Swaros, you see every detail. So, you talk about instant reaction. It was like, oh my goodness, there's only a handful of guys in the world that have ever seen an elk like that alive, at that distance. But so took off down there. It took me about 15 minutes to get to that finger ridge there, and slipped up over the top, and he wasn't there. And I'm sitting there telling myself, okay, this country, you know what they like to do. It's shady down here. It's cool. There was elk sign all around me. I said, he's going to come back here. Stay right here. Do not go up above, because if he has cows, they're going to be bedded above you here. Don't bump them. And in that 15-minute walk, that to get to that finger ridge, there's a lot of things going through your mind. How are you going to play this out? What are you going to do? Let your instincts, you've hunted long enough, trust your instincts, but don't bump into that mule deer doe or that little spike mule deer that's going to blow right into the middle of them or chase them out. So you're looking for those types of things, or that white-tailed doe that can pop up and blow things up. And if you've bow hunted long enough, you know what I'm talking about. And the wind, of course, also the wind is everything when you're bow hunting elk or any animal. But so had that strong wind, had my wind checker. I was confident, I do not carry a bugle when I hunt over there. So we found bugling to be very ineffective. Those bulls with the low elk density, those bulls, I believe they know every bull elk within 10 miles, 15 miles, 20 miles around. They're not. We haven't. When we hunted early there, we did a little bit of that, but we found that to be ineffective. And we do very limited call calling. We found call calling to be extremely effective at the right time, but also found that overcalling doesn't do you a lot of good either sometimes. So very, very reluctant to use a call. In the right situation, we have, but it's not something we do a lot of. So got to that point, and I said to myself, stay here, don't move. He's going to come back here at some point here in the next hour or two. Be smart, because I knew how the land laid above, and it opened up into a fairly big area. So my thought was, he's not going to leave this spot here right now. Be patient, let it play out. Well, it wasn't a few minutes later, and I look up and hear a bull bugle, and below me was kind of a little bit of a bowl, like I said, and then it kind of rose up into this circular top, and I see this smaller bull walking away or walking away from where the bigger bull I figured he was. So he comes walking along. I'm sorry here. He comes walking along. He bugles a couple times, and I said, that big bull is not going to be far from here. And sure enough, throw my glasses back up, see some movement, and here he is walking directly behind that elk, and he's all postured up. And when you see an elk that big, he was about 100 yards away, and I had my glasses on him. And he's one of those elk, when he walked like that, his head swayed back and forth, and that rack was just sticking out. And I was just chuckling to myself, going, "Oh my goodness, that's a big bull." And and I kept calm. I said to myself, he is going to walk right down here. Don't blow this. Don't call. And just be patient. Let it happen. So I'm pretty confident that he had cows bedded up above, and he was just kind of walking that bull off away from there. So they're going out across that upper bowl, and I said, he's going to turn and come down here any second. Sure enough, he took a few more steps, and he turned and he starts down. And I'm still probably 90, 95 yards away from him. I said, be patient. He's going to come right down here. So, and
that's Dylan. For you and me, it'd be more like, be patient, stop shaking.
Yeah. So here he comes, and I've got my rangefinder, and I've got my arrow knocked, and I'm my heart's beating a little bit, but I kept it together off pretty well, actually. So here he's coming. He's at 90 yards. He's at 80 yards, and he's slowly coming. They're bugling back and forth, and he's feeding a little bit, so he's really comfortable. And the other bull's feeding a little bit, and he's just kind of keeping that bull, letting him know, don't come over here, kind of paying attention to what he's doing. And he's at 70 yards, and I'm like, you only take a shot at this elk if it's the perfect setup. You got a lot of time this season. Be smart about this, but don't screw it up. So he's coming. He's at 65, and he's starting to, he's directly across from me now. And if he goes another 10, 15 yards, he's going to get out of it. My shooting lane is going to be pretty limited at that point. He's at 65, 64, 63. And this took 15, 20 minutes as I'm watching him do this. So there's plenty of time to be nervous. And the last time I ranged him, he was at 61 yards. He had his head down and his front leg forward. That was towards me. And I said, well, it's now or never. So his head was down. I drew, got a clean draw. He never lifted his head. And I said, so I tucked that 60-yard pin right behind the shoulder where I wanted it, and I released, and I'll never forget that arrow flying, and it's just etched in my mind. And I don't remember necessarily seeing the arrow hit, but I heard it, and he flinched down, and he turned and he ran straight up away from me, and I threw my binocs up on him. I could see the arrow all the way through and buried up to the fletching, and he ran straight up away from me. And my initial thought was, oh, it's a little high. And then he ran up. He ran about 20 yards up to the top of the bowl, and it benched out over the top. And he stopped momentarily. And when he took off again, he stumbled. And I said, took the lunge right out of him.
It's over.
I said, I got him. So he takes off, and I was pretty sure I heard him go down. And then, just a few seconds after that, that smaller bull just comes peeling out of there. And I said, he went down. That's why that bull's leaving. And that's when I lost it. That's when I just melted down. My knees were shaking. I mean, I was just like, oh my God, what just happened? I was so nervous, and then you're sitting there, I'm pretty sure I got him. I'm pretty sure I got him. But if you're a bow hunter, you don't have them until you got your hands on them, And so I'm just sitting there, playing the scenarios through my head, and I said, told myself, you got to give him 30 minutes. You've been taught that. You've followed that your entire career. Do not push him, because we've all been there. If you've bow hunted long enough, you've seen those things happen, and sometimes they don't turn out very well. So I sat down, grabbed my Gatorade out of my pack, and started going through my gear. I was so nerved up. I spilled Gatorade down the front of my shirt as I was trying to, calm myself down. And
What color?
grape. Purple.
Grape. Okay, purple Gatorade. All right.
Yeah.
Jason's
Well,
an orange guy.
I'm gonna add that to my. Not anymore, man. I don't like grape, but if it'll help me kill a world record, I might switch over.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I said, give him a half hour. I looked at my my Garmin GPS. How about that? So
Shameless plug. Shout out to Garmin.
Shameless plug. We'll take it all day long.
So and it was about 9:00. I said, wait till 9:30. Do not go over there. So went through all the stuff in my pack. I looked at my knives, my game bags, my saw. I made sure I had everything, and I knew I did because I had checked everything out the night before, and sat, and I said, well, a half hour, let's go see what's going on, and walked across to where I shot him. No blood, no hair, but I knew exactly where he went up. So I get up to the top, and I could see the grass where it's tore up, and it benched out real nice, and it was kind of a scattered ponderosa, little park meadow. And I took maybe 15, 20 steps with my head down, and I looked up, and they're probably 20, 25 yards away. I could see the main beam sticking up out of the grass, and I was just like,
and then it was on.
And then I was like, oh my. So I walked up, and I got about 10 yards from him, and I stopped, and I turned around and went back and sat down for a minute and put my hands in my head and said, oh my God, what have I done? I think this has been a dream of mine for 35 years, a truly big elk, a 350 elk is a truly big elk, but a 447 elk is something that most people can't even dream about.
Yeah.
Because it's not realistic. So I walked up to him, looked at him, was just in awe. I said a couple prayers of thanks, the good Lord and the hunting partners over the years that wouldn't have happened without, supportive parents and supportive friends and things like that. You had to appreciate the people that help get you there. So I didn't have, the ability to take great field photos because I was by myself. So I took a couple of quick videos with my phone. I think those have been shared. Outdoor Life ran them when they ran the story back in 2017. They've been viewed by a few million people. It's pretty real stuff, I mean, that's real. And so
now was there any kind of dance involved, like a happy dance or any kind of like a touchdown celebration, anything of that nature?
No, that's not my style generally.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, that's our style. We're
yeah.
I hear you.
I'd have been boogieing on that mountain.
I hear you. When you come up on an animal like that, that is incredibly humbling. I mean, that critter was, good Lord's not making many of them.
No.
So, and I the thing that's so cool about this elk is he's so symmetrical, and killed him on September 10th. There isn't a point that's broomed off, rubbed down, split, cracked. I mean, he is just perfect condition, and I knew the elk was big. And when I was taking that video in the first few minutes after I got there, I knew it was a 380 plus elk, but it never occurred to me that this could be a 447 inch gross elk. And
so did world record ever even cross your mind?
No, it did not. And that's where this story gets really, really interesting here. This story gets even better. So, which is I think why a lot of people enjoy hearing it. But so I had to get to work. I mean, I'm by myself. I got to break this bugger down. I got to get him quartered, split, caped, hung. I mean, there was no way I was going to get that elk out all in one day. So I had to get him cooled out. So I went to work, skinned him, caped him, got all the meat into game bags. It was a 3-hour ordeal. A lot of work when you're not used to doing it. That's the kicker with those things.
Well, by yourself with an elk is just hard. It takes somebody, it's nice to have somebody there, even if they're just holding the leg and helping you out. It's hard to do an elk by yourself.
Exactly. So I used those Havalon Parenta knives, and I literally went through a dozen blades breaking him down. I have been around a lot of bull elk on the ground, a lot of field dressing, a lot of field work, quarters, deboning. I'll tell you, this elk was an incredible specimen. He had fat on his hinds that were 2 inches thick. So he was an incredible animal, and the habitat there, that year, that area had burned previously in 2012. Talking to some biologists, about it, they say that time frame there with a burn like that, it was mainly a ground burn. It didn't kill a lot of the trees, so it wasn't super hot. But they said that type of grass in that country is almost like green alfalfa at about the 4th year after that burn. It is so nutritious. Yeah. And habitat, Pope and Young, habitat is still key to animals. I don't care where you're at. If you don't have habitat, you don't have critters. And that was so true with this elk. So I got him broke down. I had him hung up, and I knew I didn't have enough coolers with. I had 2 coolers with me. I had a Yeti and a large, another large one, but I knew it wasn't going to be enough to get everything in. So at about a 2.5 mile walk, pack out back to the truck, and through some up and down stuff. It wasn't like a flat all downhill. So it was probably in the mid 60s by then, warm, but I had everything in game eggs. I had it down low. I had good air circulation. So I was pretty confident I was going to be okay with the meat. So my thought was to pack heaviest to lightest. So take the heaviest load first, and then start, so you're not having the heaviest loads last. So the heaviest thing I had was the cape. I had left a ton of cape and horns, and I said, I'm going to take that first. It's going to be the most miserable thing to pack, so I'm going to get that out of the way. I've got a good pack. Mystery Ranch makes a heck of a pack for packing meat and packing horns, and I'd packed elk on that before, and deer and things, and antelope, and got it snugged up, got it on my back, and I went about 20 yards, and it was slightly downhill, and that ain't going to work. It was too heavy, too awkward. So unpacked it. What I was going to have to do, I was going to have to cape him off the skull and skull chop him, which I was not super excited about doing that, but that's the only way I was going to get it out of there by myself. So I went back to where the meat was, hung the elk, got it wedged up as high as I could, the rack, and took a load of meat, took the next heaviest load of meat. Got back to my truck about, must have been 5:30ish. Was pretty dehydrated, pretty tired. And I said, get this back to camp. Got it in the Yeti. Said, I need some more ice. I need dry ice. So I raced to town, got 3 more coolers, got some dry ice, got back to town.
Now that's a good day hunting when you're buying 3 more coolers and dry ice.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I raced back to camp. I didn't race back to camp, but I got back to camp. It was probably 7:30, 8 o'clock, tired, trying to drink as much Gatorade and water as I could. Might have been a beer mixed in there or two. So I said, I'm going to get up early and get after it. So I got up at 2 o'clock the next morning, got in there, hiked in quick, and went to skull caping. So got it peeled off. A little nervous in the dark with my headlamp, sawing those antlers off because I didn't want to make a mistake and split them somehow. but I made really good cuts. Didn't take that long. I had a good saw, got them off, and it was still super heavy, but I threw the cape in my pack, got the horns on, and headed out. And going through some sagebrush, I took 2 miserable headers. You know, and when you're doing that, it's work. You're pissy. You know, you're like, it's hard work. It's rewarding work, but it's hard. And got my feet tangled up in some sagebrush, and oh shit, tumbled and get up bitching, you know, but I got it back to the truck, and I said, you know, by 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock this afternoon, this is going to be pretty hard. So I got on my GPS hard, and I knew it. I knew the road was there. I'd never been on it, but I knew it was there. There was a road that came around the backside. It was an open Forest Service road. So I said, I'm going to try to get closer. So I loaded the rack and the cape, the pack in the truck, and headed down. And I got within about a half mile of where the elk was, but it's a lot steeper. So I said, well, make it work, buddy. You got to get this done. So headed up, and I had everything back to the truck, 3 more loads. I had everything back at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and in the coolers. And that is a pretty rewarding feeling, gentlemen, when you get that done. And
when you went back for that next load, did you lock those? They probably wouldn't even fit in the front of the truck. You had to put them in the back and just
put them in the back. And I left them in the back.
Whew,
I left them in the back. You know, I mean, Montana guys are generally good guys, and I mean, could somebody have grabbed it? They sure could have. You know, was it the smartest thing to do? Probably not. But I was just focused on trying to get it done.
Right.
Legs were cramping, tired. You know, they're 50-year-old legs. They're good legs, but they're 50-year-old legs, and with some pretty sore ankles and knees, and but got it down there. Grabbed a beer out of the cooler, went over and sat under a ponderosa pine, and just reflected on a lot of things. And pretty emotional moment. Wishing Chad was there. You think about a lot of things, and you know, you don't set out. I never set out to be this great trophy hunter or whatever, but when you dream about certain things and you're able to accomplish those goals, it's awfully rewarding. And Jason, you talked earlier about could have been any one of us, and that's true. It could have been. It really could have been. It wasn't an outfitted hunt. It was, you know, it's just I'd like to think it was a guy being persistent and following his instincts and just doing the best he could and loving every minute of it.
Oh,
even though when you wipe out, you're pissy and you're tired and you're cussing, you know, you get up and you look around. Well, did anybody see me do that?
Nobody saw it. Yeah.
No.
You know, at least if you're going to be pissy, you know, be pissy with the world record 400 and some inch bullets. You know, me and Dylan, we just, you know, we take headers with our forking horns. So
right.
But,
you know, so that's, you know, packing those elk, it's a lot of work when you have a hunting partner. And that was and that was 5 loads, you know, and I was, you know, I'd been working pretty hard, you know, on the ellipticals and on, you know, the bikes leading up to that. And I was in pretty decent shape. My legs were really strong, and that's the key, is your legs when you're packing like that. But pretty rewarding. So drank that beer, got back to camp that afternoon, and probably got back about 4 o'clock. Took the rack out, laid it by the tent. Probably not the smartest thing to do, but at that point, I didn't give a shit. It was like, yep. So my goal was to, you know, get something to eat, get to bed, get up early in the morning, break camp, and head for home. So my original plan was to be back to work on Tuesday. You know, Monday was going to be the travel days, and this was Sunday night when I got back. And there were a couple other hunters camped nearby, and they saw the elk laying there, so they drove over and congratulations, great elk, you know. And I asked the one dude, what do you think that elk scores? And he says, I'm betting 370, 380, maybe a little better. And so I thought my guess was pretty good. I think I'm right there. And just looking at it, the symmetry was so good. I knew there was not going to be much for deduction. So I said, yeah, this is super cool. So go to bed, tired, dehydrated, get up that next morning to a light rain just as the sun's coming up. And took me 15, 20 minutes to break camp down quick, threw the tent in, headed out, and the rain's intensifying. And I was able to get a couple text pictures out to Chad, and he texted me back. I really couldn't talk to him. And I said, I think he's 380 plus. And he texted me back and he says, dude, it's bigger than that just by looking at the picture. And I said, well, maybe. I said, yeah, I'll see you later today with it, because I was headed back towards home, and he lives in Bozeman, and Bozeman was on the way home. So I was cruising along, and the Cabela's in Billings, Montana, off I-90 there has they did, I haven't been in there for a while, but they had a 400-inch elk life-size mount as you walk in the store. So I figured it was Monday morning. It's a little rainy, probably not super busy. So I parked right out in front of Cabela's and wanted to go in there and look and kind of compare real quick on my way home. Everybody gives me crap about parking there in Billings. Somebody could have grabbed that rack. Well, they could have, but I kept an eye on it as I walked in the store. I could still see it, but so I walk in and I look at that elk and I study it for a minute or two. And then I walk back out and I look at the rack in the back of my truck, and I said to myself, oh boy, this rack in the back of my truck is considerably bigger than that one. Yeah. So I was like, but I was tired, wanted to get home. So got out of there. So then I called my taxidermist, John Berger in Bozeman, and said, John, I'm going to drop the cape off. If you're not there, no problem. Because I figured he was probably hunting somewhere, but he wasn't. He was actually having lunch downtown at the Western Cafe in one of his favorite spots. But I told him I got a good one. I said, I think he's 380, maybe a little bit better. He said, well, I'll be there. I want to see it. So I got to Bozeman at 1 o'clock, pulled into his driveway, and he wasn't there yet. He was still down at the cafe. And I popped the tailgate and had it sitting there on the back of the tailgate. And he drives in and he comes over and he looks at the elk and he studies it for a minute or two. And he looks at me kind of quizzically and he says, what do you think that scores? And I said, well, I think it's probably 380, maybe a little better. And he says, it's way bigger than that. And I said, well, what should we do? And he says, well, let's put a rough score on it. So he goes into his shop. He works out of his basement, and he grabs a cloth seamstress tape and a manila envelope. And he said, I'll score and you write. I said, no problem. So he said, I'm going to be very conservative. I'm going to round everything down. So did it in about 15 minutes. Had a left column, a right column, and a spreadsheet. And I wasn't doing any numbers in my head. So I grabbed my calculator when we were done, and I added up one side, and I looked at the number and I laughed and I said, well, I had to misadd. So I added up again. I came up with the same number. And I'm like, oh boy. So then I added up the other side. And when I talked about symmetry, I came up with the exact same number.
Wow.
So I looked at Berger and I said, Berger, it's 390 without the spread credit. And we both kind of looked at each other. And I said, when I put the spread credit in there, it's like 432 or something, John. He says, what? I said, yeah. And he says, and I said, well, we chuckled and said, well, what's the world record? I said, I don't know. I have no idea. So we got on our phones and of course we pulled it up, and Sean Patterson, 412 and change, I think, in 2004. And we laughed, and Berger bellers out, it's the new world record. It's the new world record. And I said, well, not so fast, but maybe, you know. So John says, we need to call Fred. And Fred King is a Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young measurer. He lives in the Gallatin Valley. And Fred's a pretty famous scorer. He's been on several panels. He was on the Spider Bull panel. He was on the Milo Hansen world record whitetail panels. So he's very well respected, and he knows his business. And I've had Fred score some animals over the years, and he's a super nice guy. He explains to you what he's doing, and he's quite an asset to Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett. And he worked for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks for a lot of years, and was really a great advocate for Montana Wildlife and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. Great guy. But so he comes over. It's here about 20 minutes, and John calls him up, and he said, and Fred knows John well too, and said, Burger, what do you got? And Burger says, I got the new world record over in my shop. Fred says, I'll be over there right away. So here he comes. Takes him about 20 minutes, and he comes in around the corner of the shop, and we had it laying on the floor of the rack, and he looks at it and he goes, oh my. So he said, let's put a green score on it. And I said, by all means. So he brings his briefcase in and gets the score sheets out, and he's an extremely meticulous fella.
That's a measure right there.
That's a measure, exactly. So and by that point, I called a couple of friends. Chad got there, and a couple other close friends, Corey and Kent, and they show up, and Fred is, I've got the manila envelope laying there, and Fred's writing on a score sheet, and Burger, being the taxidermist he is, he grabs the cape and he starts fleshing the cape. So Burger's fleshing the cape. I'm holding the horns for Fred, and my friends are in the background watching. And Burger told me when he was doing this that he was being really conservative with the numbers, and he was right. So Fred starts scoring. He writes the number down, and I look over and see what I wrote down, and I'm looking over at Burger and I'm going, it's way bigger, Burger. It's way bigger. So, which was fun, Oh, I mean, yeah. So Fred spent a lot of time, and he was meticulous. So, and he's adding stuff up, and I'm watching, and I look down at the gross score, and it's 448 and some inches. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So Fred gets done, and he announces the gross score, and everybody just kind of stood there in stunned silence, like, oh my goodness, Chad got a little emotional, because we set some good goals for ourselves, and one of us had gotten there, and it was, so that, and then everybody was kind of high-fiving and fired up about it. And we took a ton of pictures then, and Fred was, really happy to be a part of it. And nothing was official by any means, but it was a pretty good feeling. And 448 and a 429 and something net score, which at that point, there wasn't a lot of doubt that that this was probably the new world record. There was no, so it's interesting. I'm a pretty private guy. I don't crave the spotlight. It doesn't make me feel real comfortable some days. And I've learned to be a lot better with that over this whole thing. But Chad still had that tag, and I didn't really want a lot of people knowing where we were, and pretty protective of that spot, and we still are. But so I said, we took pictures.
We do have a graphic up right now, a map with the pinpoint for that spot.
Sure you do.
Everybody just go to the website. It's right there. We've got the pin, no problem.
Yeah. So
that's how you drive website traffic right there.
Right. So I'm tired. I want to get home. And Chad says, you're not going home, buddy. You're staying at my place tonight. I said, okay. Check the meat. Meat had plenty of ice. It was cold. It was good. So stopped and got a nice bottle of Buffalo Trace, and called over a few close friends, and got to tell the story there that night and drink a little whiskey. And we probably had 20 people there at Chad's house, and it was a good night.
That's, one of the things that there's a lot of parts that I love about this story, but the one that you touched on initially is, this didn't start off as a quality story. This started off as, hey, you know what? I had a really rough day at work, and, you talk about, being persistent, and a lot of people, they have that rough day at work and then they just go sit on the couch and they don't get off the couch and drive up the mountain. And that's the persistence that you look at right there that made it. And it's like, hey, I had a bad day, seeing something like that. I can't imagine that. And then you went anyway. Your buddy was busy, but you went anyway, did it by yourself. And then you went to a place, public land hunt. And the whole thing is just a great story. I mean, at any point in time, the decision could have been made to not proceed, to not go to the next step.
Sure.
And then, then when you came around the rise and you're expecting him to be there and he's gone, and you're just like, okay. Oh, he's not there. What now? And then, you made a decision, and it's possible he could have never come back, but he did. You made the right call because you knew the area and you knew your quarry. And it's just, to me, all of those things combine, the started off with a bad day, and then you made the choice to go, even without your hunting buddy. And all of those, to me, just combine to make it the kind of story that I think people need to hear.
It is a pretty cool story, isn't it?
It really is, and it was, even when you were telling us there in the tent there at MAF, it's just like, wow, that it really resonated with me, because it could have gone either way. I mean, back in the day, they used to have those stories. It was choose your own ending. And, you could say, hey, do you want to go left or right? And then you turn to that page. And this is a lot like one of those and fortunately you chose all the right turns, throughout the whole story.
As hunting as many years as I have, that day started out feeling special from the day I got up, the time I got up. I knew, I've had a handful of those days, where everything works.
Yeah.
Everything comes together. They're rare. As bow hunters, people don't realize how hard an elk is to kill with an arrow. It is difficult. Things have got to go perfect or you can forget it. Those elk generally do not make many mistakes, especially those big ones.
Yeah, that's how they get big.
Exactly. And this elk had been hunted. He was not, everybody says, well, they had seen him before. I don't know if anybody's seen him before. Maybe not. I don't think we had. We may have. But the interesting thing about this bull is he's only 6.5 years old. We had a tooth cut. A good friend of mine, Matt Nisler, and his wife, Carolyn, has Matson Labs in Bozeman, and she offered to cut a tooth in 6.5.
Wow.
That just speaks of the genetics and the special, the special part of that. It's just a special elk. And
the genetics, the habitat, the feed, you got him early before he was breaking points off. I mean, just everything came together.
Exactly.
To get a number like that.
And it's interesting, I had a pretty darn good run of luck there. So I killed that elk on September 10th, and I met my wife on September 18th. So, and I tell people, the elk was lucky, but Darla was way luckier for me. And she's been through this whole elk story with me and everything. And she's a great lady and super supportive. And yeah, it's I had a pretty good run of luck there. Pretty good 8-day stretch of luck.
That's a pretty good stretch right there, Steve.
It is. So,
that's that's great. And it's one of those things where I heard it and I knew, for anyone who hadn't heard the story, they needed to hear this story, because it's just, it really can happen to anybody. And, it's great that it happened to you. And I appreciate talking to people and, that genuinely appreciate the opportunity of the situation that they're in. And it's not like, if that bull would have been a 385, you'd have still been pleased. You'd have been plumb happy with 385.
It wouldn't have mattered, right? It wouldn't have mattered. I was thrilled with that elk. I mean, it's, it's easy for guys to get caught up in score and all this and everything. I mean, that elk is what it is. I mean, it just happened to be the world record, I didn't set out that day to kill the world record. That's never, I mean, yeah. As a kid growing up, you think, oh, I mean, you want to be successful. It's interesting story. Another little backstory here. I grew up in Minnesota, and my mother was an English teacher, an English major, and she taught. Reading was very important to her. Being well read, being very, very grammatically correct, and so I spent a lot of time in the library or in the school library when I was growing up. And I remember reading an article Outdoor Life about the Montana state record when I was probably 13, 14 years old. Fred Mercer had the typical Montana state record until my elk bumped that off. So I remember that. So interesting story. Fred Mercer killed the former Montana typical state record, I think in 1958 in Madison County. And I remember reading the story in Outdoor Life and thinking, man, someday it'd be cool to go elk hunting in Montana, growing up in Minnesota. So yeah, no, I mean, it's, and being able to come and live here in Montana and live in Sealy, I've lived a very blessed life, so.
Well, it's neat. And it's, you moved to Montana partly for the elk hunting. We had Frank Noska on the other day, and he's like, hey man, I moved to Alaska because there's more to hunt up here.
Yep.
And you see that, and it's truly neat when you hear about that, and then it all comes together. So, well, I'll tell you what, Steve, we have one question that we ask every guest on this program. I may know what your answer is, but I can't wait to actually hear it. So what is one thing when you're putting your pack together, what is one thing, kind of maybe a non-traditional item that you have in your pack that you can't live without?
One thing I can't live without. If there's one thing that I cannot live without, is my 10x50 swirls.
Okay.
That is one thing I cannot live without.
All right. Dylan, can we take 10x50 swirls?
What do you think?
I think we're going to have to probably get Swirl on the phone.
I think if you kill a world record, you can give me whatever answer you want to, and I'm going to accept it.
You know what? Point taken. Because technically, Swirl's not a corporate partner yet, but neither is Uncrustables, and we took Uncrustables.
Oh, and they're the best.
I mean, we took lipstick the other day from Shelley Fulton. So you know what? We'll go with 10x50 swirls.
Jason, I got to give you a quick follow up. Saw a post on social media the other day, and it was like, what's your favorite tree stand snack? And I commented and said, we here at Pope and Young are passionate about our Uncrustables. There was like 40 dudes commenting back, being like, amen, preach on it. Like, you got it. Like,
did you post the video?
No, well, I've posted the video before, but I just commented on their post, and dudes were jumping all over it, and they're like, yeah, you're right. Wrap it in a napkin. It's not as loud. Like, they had loved this ever since they were children. And I'm like, well, we're not wrong. Number one tree stand snack of America.
We need to Google Uncrustables every day to see what pops up on Facebook, and just throw our video in every single thread. So anyway, yeah, Steve, we like to have fun here. So it's so we're gonna take your answer. We're gonna put it on the list, and I can't blame you there. They do make some good glass.
Yes, they do. Can't live without them.
So, well, I'll tell you what's a piece of advice for somebody else out there who just saw your article and is just hearing about it, thinking, man, it sure be nice to hunt elk in Montana someday.
The best thing I can say is be persistent, be patient, and trust your instincts, because they're usually right. So I've learned that over the years. Trust your instincts, because they're more right than they are wrong generally. So
excellent.
And persistence. Be persistent. So
get off the couch.
Right on. You can't get him from the couch.
You can't get him from the couch. So, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to be back in Reno in 23, and we're expecting 150 world-class records, and hopefully we've got a couple that are even challenging your bowl, although That's a big challenge. But anyway, we've got a brand new world record section that we're having a convention every year. So
yep,
we'd love to see that bull in Reno in 23.
Yeah, we've talked about that. I like we talked. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see the original there in Springfield when you guys get that done. So I think that would be an awfully good place for it. So
sounds good.
Yep.
Well, hey, thanks so much for being with us. Love the story, and I love the hope that it brings everybody who hears it. And I hope everybody enjoys that and gets that takeaway that it literally could be you. So
it's a good story, isn't it? It's a good story. It is
a really good story. Yeah.
So I appreciate it, guys.
You bet. Steve, thanks so much. Have a great day, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.